There have been 110 Precons released between 2020 and 2025, but there are 13 that are more fun than the rest. And today, we're going to talk about what makes those decks so much fun. Plus, I'll tell you which cards from the 99 of each of those decks are the funnest. Welcome back to Sadgic the Gathering. I'm your host, and the comments section has fundamentally bodied me because apparently I only play Precons. It's fair. I have gone through every Precon released from 2020 to 2025, and I have picked the top, the elite, the superior 13 decks that are the most fun. Not the most powerful, not the most popular, not the ones with the most infinite combos, turn one wins, the most fun Precons. But what does that mean? Well, a few things. First, and most importantly, a fun deck has to have a unique strategy. It has to be a deck that's interesting and distinct and dynamic and makes each game exciting and different. Next is how it's constructed. Does it include cards that 10 other similar decks are running copy-paste, or does it bring new cards and new combos to the table that are often overlooked or underutilized? And lastly is the theme or story of the deck, sort of the lore that creates the fictional world that the deck lives in. What kind of story and art does the deck hold? Does it feel like a succinct work of art, or does it sort of feel like a hobbled together mess? And before you say, Jaren, what about powerful? Winning games is fun. Winning games is fun. And I don't think you should ever approach a game thinking, I do not want my deck to win. But personally, winning with a super powerful deck is not my first priority. I even did a poll on this channel of what people think makes a commander deck fun. And about 250 people answered. Guess what was in last place? By a wide margin. So I just want to say, suck it, Julidoc and Ulalek. Sorry. I did have a really hard time ranking these, so I ultimately decided to just show them in the chronological order that they were released. Plus, as we go through this, I will call out what I think are like the two funnest cards from the Precon, or the cards that highlight the strategy in a really fun way. So let's get into it. First up is Anowon the Ruin Thief from Zendikar Rising. This deck is such a masterpiece of tribal design. Anowon takes an established, abundant creature type like rogues and gives it a little juice, and then gives it such a powerful and flavorful way to win the game with mill and combat damage. The sky's the limit here as far as going wide and popping off with this thing. It really has a good deck setup. And the little draw card effect is such a nice sweetener to make this thing that much better. The deck is dominant and it's clear in its objectives. And it disarms your opponent in such a sneaky and engaging way. Anowon in this deck feel like a really important moment for Precons, as it sort of marks this turn in figuring out how a Precon should be built as far as power level and support. And I think it did a lot for the Precons that came after it. It felt like such a good template that could be built and improved upon, but at a starting level, it really works. I think some of the funnest cards to play here are Una's Blackguard, which just smashes the gas pedal on the overall strategy, and Notorious Throng, which is such a nasty late game card with a massive go wide opportunity and an extra turn. This deck is a little older, but it really does hold up. Next, we have Breena the Demagogue from Strixhaven. I would say that this is probably the most fun politically focused Precon and maybe even commander you can play without things becoming sort of janky or gimmicky. This deck is effectively the same thing as screaming, this guy still has 3 lives when you're playing Super Smash Bros. Encouraging your opponents to attack the biggest threat and getting a little reward and you getting a little reward is really fun. It's such a stellar way to police the board while still staying in the good graces of everyone around you while quietly building up a massive battlefield. It's a deck that encourages a lot of discussion and negotiation and deceit and diplomacy, and that to me is just like the most fun way to play the game. I gotta say, I think they were really cooking with the Strixhaven Precons. They're all really, really good. To this day, they remain some of the most interesting out-of-the-box decks that you can get in Magic. This deck has a lot of really fun ways to interact with your opponents, and I think the most fun cards that let you do that are Cunning Rhetoric, which keeps everyone in line and sort of discourages outright attack without some retribution, and Combat Calligrapher, which sort of rewards people for being sweet to you and destroying everyone around you. It's a dangerous and exhilarating strategy that I feel like just doesn't get stale. Then we have Prosper Tome-Bound from Adventures in Forgotten Realms. This is one of the coolest and wildest strategies, and it has such a clear, great payoff. Prosper himself is so tightly and near perfectly designed. From the protection of his death touch to the chaotic once per turn exile thing, and the functional way to run it all with getting treasures. At face value, the commander just sort of wants to stay in its own lane without punishing anyone, but secretly it's so mean and it's so aggressive and it's really, really fun. I think the colors here are what really make this deck sing. You have the aggressive explosiveness of red, but you have the control and drain of black. It's totally chaotic, and yet it never feels random or weak. It encourages a ton of interaction. I think some of the most fun cards from the deck are Wild Magic Sorcerer, which becomes this fountain of insanity that usually helps you win the game, and Share the Spoils, which I think is one of the most fun cards I've ever enjoyed while not playing it. And I think it's the perfect chaos piece in this deck. I love this deck. I think this thing is really formidable and engaging of everyone on the board. And even if you don't play it, find a way to play against it. Next is Wilhelt the Rotcleaver from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. More like Wilhelt the Rockstar, right guys? Look, I know you guys are gonna say, oh look, a zombie precon, how original, Jaren, you... Gosh, you guys are mean to me today. I think Wilhelt belongs on this list because his deck sort of unifies a lot of pre-existing zombie strategies while still adding something that feels distinct and balanced. He has the death trigger payoff that you want to see in a zombie deck. He's got a happy little card draw ability you need to get ahead. And I think Decayed is a really cool ability that lets you flood the board without your opponents wanting to scoop and gouge their eyes out. You definitely get some bigger hits in this deck with like Rooftop Storm and Endless Ranks of the Dead, but I think the funnest cards in this deck are Hordewing Scab, which gives your zombie army a very unique skill set and lets you filter your hand really well, and Empty the Laboratory, which gives you a really fun, splashy way to sort of clear up the dead weight on your battlefield while refreshing and getting some big payoffs. I feel like Wilhelt made zombies feel fresh, which is hard to do. Let's jump over to Baldur's Gate with Nalia de Arnis, one of the best optimal and fun out-of-the-box precons you can find anywhere. And it's also personally one of my favorite precons ever. And I think that's because of what Nalia is requiring the deck to be. It doesn't need the best and brightest wizards, warriors, clerics, rogues. It functions really well on a pretty simple, lean, uncommon setup. It definitely takes a pretty big swing here in a risky way, but I think it totally pays off. The uniqueness factor in this deck is just super high. And I think part of what makes it so fun is the precarious position that the person playing it is in. The whole strategy can really fall apart way easier than most decks. But that objective being so clear and distinct makes the journey to getting there so fun and the payoff so satisfying. I think the most fun cards in this deck have to be Seasoned Dungeoneer, which is just jam-packed with so many things, right? It's like protection, you get initiative, you can explore. And then I gotta mention the GOAT, which is Black Market Connections, which is basically just the ultimate Swiss Army tool card in any deck, but especially this one. This deck is one of the most motivating to play and honestly one of the most satisfying to succeed with. All right, I gotta give it to Henzie Toolbox Torre from Streets of New Capenna. He has one of the coolest, boldest, punchiest strategies that you can find in a precon ever. It's maybe like a perfect Jund deck, right? I mean, it's got the stompiness you want in green, it's got the speed you want in red, and it's got the sacrifice you want in black. And then you get a little card draw on your way out the door. This thing is fast and oppressive, and there are so many ways for it to succeed, and I think it's really hard to stay on top of as an opponent. Getting to vomit your hand onto the battlefield with amazing ETBs and really strong death triggers in a really fast, repetitive way. It just kind of feels like... And I love that you don't have to be too precious with it because everything is coming and going so quickly. The most fun things in this deck are probably Protection Racket, which is such a shot to the nuts for your opponents because either exile the thing or give it to me. And then Beamtown Bullies, which is such a head scratcher as you're giving away your big legendary stuff to do your bidding. And you can definitely take it out because it does deserve its own deck, but it's really cool. Henzie is definitely a deck that lives up to the hype. Look, I'm not gonna lie, Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings is my favorite Precon I've ever played. You knew a Lord of the Rings Precon was gonna be on this list. And how did you know? Because they're arguably the best thematically well-constructed Precons ever, especially the Hobbit one. Look, I'll admit it, I'm super biased. I'm a Lord of the Rings freak, and hobbits are my favorite little guys, you know? But even if I wasn't biased, this deck still belongs on this list. This deck packs so much of a punch, but like in true hobbit fashion, it is so hard to see coming. Balancing life gain via food tokens with a little hobbit tribal sub-theme and kind of a ring tempting thing going on as well, make this deck the type of thing that can go exponential like that. You have to keep your eye on it if you're playing against it. For me, every single time I play this deck, it's just an absolute joy. Seeing your synergies connect and your board build, I think, is one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced while playing Magic. For the funnest cards, I think you gotta start by mentioning the Gaffer, because whenever you see at the end of each turn ability on a card, you know it's doing big work. You've also got Farmer Cotton, who I think is actually one of the best endgame pieces you can have in a token deck. I will never stop playing this deck. I will give up on all of my decks before I give this one up. Okay, I'm gonna get some heat for this one, but next is Hakbal of the Searching Soul from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. You mean this Hakbal? The reason that he teeters into cringe territory is because that's him, Your Honor. Look, is Hakbal theoretically cringe? Yeah, kind of. Is he also perhaps the strongest and tightest out-of-the-box Precon you can get? Also, yes, kind of. There is rarely a Precon that exists that does not require some form of fine-tuning or upgrading to really make it shine. I think Hakbal might be at the top of the list of not needing that. He's kind of the dream commander, right? I mean, he offers card draw, he offers ramp, he offers tribal support, he offers deck filtering, he offers +1/+1 counters. This is the Precon that I feel like you give to someone who is new to Magic, but you can tell they're serious. Because I know that it's a deck that they just will not ever give up on. It is an absolute bear and a burden to manage, especially in the late game with the amount of counters and stuff going on. It's a lot, but it always does what it's supposed to do and it bounces back so quickly. I think some of the most fun cards here are Master of the Pearl Trident, which just takes what you're doing and makes it so much more formidable. And Ripples of Potential, which is a super cheap and massive protection spell. Cringe though it may be, I can't deny the fun. Nelly Borca, Impulsive Accuser, is perhaps one of the most underrated and overlooked commanders on this list. Coming from a guy that does not really like Boros, this is easily the most fun Boros commander I've ever played. And some of the most unique fun you can have while playing a Precon. The Suspect mechanic is way stronger than you think, and pairing that with Goad is diabolical. And then adding a mutual draw effect on top of it is just, it's perfect. Your ability to control the board is actually insane with this thing. It just creates a massive slugfest all around you while you get to safely watch on the front row. You know, and I usually don't like attack trigger commanders, but with the Suspect and the Goad thing, it becomes really viable. I think it can struggle in the late game when the Goad effect really isn't helping you in a 1v1 setting, but it is so entertaining. The deck itself has some really fun payoffs. I think my favorite cards are Prisoner's Dilemma, which is just such a fun mind game to play with the board on top of you already targeting, controlling so much of everything, and Trouble in Pairs, which despite some, art copying troubles, is a really amazing protection beneficial piece that sort of keeps everyone in check and rewards you. I think this deck just deserves way more love. Then we have the Wise Mothman from Fallout. I know a lot of people have had bad experiences with this deck, but I love this thing. Despite it being an absolute monster and a demon and a self-inflicting nightmare,
I love the pain. Because the pain is the truth.
I think rad counters are one of the coolest and silliest and most unique mechanics we've had from a set in recent memory. And I love that Mothman gives everyone a taste of the medicine, including himself. And secretly, I think it actually has one of the strongest +1/+1 counter strategies that you can find in a Precon anywhere. To be able to hurt your opponents and benefit off that so intensely and repetitively is crazy. And the 99 is packed with so much flavor and so much support that it really takes what the Mothman is doing and expands it into new and unique pathways that normal Precons don't usually go that deep on. It's really cool. I think some of the funnest cards here are Radstorm, which is just on the right turn, a huge piece. And Strong, Brutish Thespian, which just flips the scripts on rad counters and is an absolute beast in the late game. People can hate on this deck because it is mean, but it's a blast. Here she is, the master chef herself, Miss Bumbleflower from Bloomborough. I think this is actually the only straight up group hug Precon that exists, but it's also one of the most fun group hug commanders, full stop. This deck has so much going for it. First off, it's from Bloomborough, so thematically, it's whimsical, it's cute, it's so fun to look at and play. And this deck is probably the most interaction heavy of any Precon on this list. I mean, every single time you're casting a spell, you're giving a card. And giving out cards starts to become a really political game. And getting to be at the center of that is one of the best experiences I've ever had playing Magic. It requires constant assessment, reassessment, and negotiation. Bonds are made and broken in seconds. And I think we forget one of the most classic Magic adages, which is flying wins games. When you are stacking the board with +1/+1 counters and giving all your stuff flying repetitively, different stuff over and over again, you become so untouchable and so scary. As far as fun cards go here, I think I gotta mention Perch Protection. It's a personal favorite of mine, and I think it's one of the most chaotic group hug cards you can play, where you sort of put it on the battlefield, step back, and just watch the pandemonium ensue. And I think the other would have to be Communal Brewing, which sort of forces the hand of your opponents and gives you huge payoffs with all your stuff moving forward. I think this is the type of deck that every Magic player needs to pilot at least once in their lives. All right, let's talk about this masterpiece, Teval the Balance Scale from Tarkir Dragonstorm. In my opinion, Teval is one of the most accessible and well-rounded graveyard commanders in Sultai. And the fact that the Precon comes loaded with so much of what you need to succeed is amazing. I think what makes Teval so useful is that he does so much. He's a mill engine to fill up your graveyard, he offers land recursion, and he makes zombie tokens. He's almost so wide that it's almost hard to know how you want to build him. Do you go zombie tribal? Do you go token focused? Do you go mill centric? Do you go recursion, landfall triggers? He does all of that and can do all of that really, really well. And while I have said that I struggle with attack trigger commanders because his second ability of getting tokens onto the battlefield works so well with graveyards and recursion, I don't mind it. The payoff with zombie tokens becomes super viable even if you don't attack. I think the fun cards here are Colossal Grave Reaver, which is a graveyard monster and honestly could have run the deck by itself if you wanted it to. And Teval's Judgment, which is just like the ultimate graveyard recursion card. Teval has quickly risen the ranks to become one of the most popular commanders of all time, and it's really easy to see why. And last on our list is Hearthhull the Worldseed from Edge of Eternities. If you're shocked to see so recent a deck on this list, don't be. This thing is insanely cool and worth the hype. Land destruction is pretty bold and really risky, and I think oftentimes it can kind of make you feel like you're slowly being crushed to death. But this deck sticks the landing really well. And the unique factor is massively increased here by having a space station as your commander, especially because until you hit +8, It's not even a creature, which makes it that much harder for people to target and deal with. And hey, maybe you just don't ever make it a creature. The deck allows you to do a ton on your turns, right? You've got so many payoffs, and I think that makes playing it feel really engaging. There's always a lot going on, which you want in a Precon and you want in any deck. It's a really exciting balance of sort of managing and knowing when to cut resources that leads to some really awesome plays. My fun card picks in this deck would have to be Exploration Broodship, which is just like an incredible staple no matter what, but allows you to really make this thing functional without hurting yourself too much. And Planetary Annihilation, which is a land destruction board wipe. And to be honest, I didn't think Wizards had it in them, but they did. It's really bold and cool. Burn some land, play some aliens. You're gonna have a good time. And that's the list. There's so many decks I could have included on this list, and there's so many I was so close to including. But for you, what's your auto-include Precon that should have been on this list that maybe I didn't mention? Precons are my favorite Magic product. I think they're the most affordable, powerful, and consistent way for you to play Commander. If I didn't mention your favorite Precon, tell me in the comments, destroy me. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe and like the video if you haven't. We're really trying to grow, and any support helps. Share it with your friends, share it with your enemies. As always, follow Sadgic for more magic. See you next time.